Okay, our Zoomers will be back in just another 30 seconds or so. Oh yeah, let's move this. I'll just pass off the microphone to you. I think this one will work better, so I'll just slip this in when I'm done. Yeah, I think I'm in. Just squeeze in there. Welcome back, Zoomers. I believe there's some really beautiful looking grapes, some apple coffee cake. We have some stuff in there, so hang around. I'm already hungry, as you can tell. Just reminding myself that there are snacks coming shortly. Okay, here we go. Welcome. I know that guy. Okay. It's Dan. All right, welcome back. It looks like our Zoomers are popping back in. Hope you had a lovely time checking in this morning. Hi, Sandy. Hi, Robin. Hi, Julie. Hi, Shuping. Welcome back. Please help me this morning. Oh, here I am. Let me squeeze in. Okay, I'm good. Please help me this morning in introducing Jeremy Sekishin Sullivan as this morning's speaker. Jeremy is a member of our center and serves on the board and has just celebrated his Jukai in April. When not at the center, you can find Jeremy at the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, helping patients recover from neurological injuries. Jeremy's talk is entitled Studying the Self. Thank you, Jeremy, for being here. Let's slip this in.
All right. Does everyone hear me okay out there? Yeah, all right. Well, thank you everyone for having me. Speaking in front of groups of people is not usually my thing, but as my Jukai ceremony was approaching, I noticed I was having this feeling as if I had something to say, and I wasn't exactly sure what it was. But somewhere along the way, Kelly reached out and asked me if I'd be willing to give a Dharma talk, and I surprised myself with how quickly I said yes. So here I am, and I'm by no means a teacher, but one thing I really love about Buddhism and Zen is that it's all about your own experience. It's all about testing things for yourself. And so, and that's a place I feel I can speak from, is that place. And so that's what I'm going to do today. Something else, another analogy that I really appreciate when it comes to teaching, it's something that I picked up in the Foundations of Mindfulness class, is this analogy of the difference between the map and the territory. So when we hear teachings, someone is giving us a map, and it's not the same as exploring the territory on your own. And so I know in my experience, sometimes I'll hear someone speak about something and I can recognize, oh, I've seen that territory, I've been there before. And other times I'll hear something and I can't recognize it, but time will pass. Sometimes it's a day or a week or a year, and I'll have an experience or have an insight or an understanding, and I'll be able to reference it to the map that someone else gave me. And so that's why I hope you guys interact with the talk today, that there might be some things that you've directly experienced, and maybe some things that will mean something to you down the road. So, as Kelly said, the title of the talk is Studying the Self. And when I first sought out a student-teacher relationship with Roshi Robert, he sat down with me and he explained that the first thing we would do is we'll study the precepts. And he said, when we study the precepts, we're essentially, we're just studying our lives. And somewhere along the way, he shared with me this quote by Dogen that says, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. And to study the self is to forget the self. And to forget the self is to be enlightened by all the 10,000 things. And so there's a lot encompassed in that. And the first part is studying the self. And it's more, I think anytime in Buddhism, we have to talk about both the relative and the absolute. A great analogy I like that I heard from Ram Dass is is we have to remember our social security number and our Buddha nature at the same time. And so that's sort of the relative and the absolute. And I'm going to speak more from the relative side. And that's that kind of the first part of that quote that talks about first we have to study ourselves and kind of see who are we in this world compared to others. You know, we're all individuals interacting with the world. And then on another plane, there's no separation. And I can't talk too much from that place yet. So I'm going to stick to the other side, to the more relative side. And so in doing this, I want to kind of use myself as a case study. And I want to kind of take it from two different angles. And I was recently listening to a talk by a teacher named James Lowe. He's a Scottish teacher, scholar of Dzogchen Buddhism. Or it's a Tibetan form of Buddhism called Dzogchen. And he said two things that really struck me. He said, the first thing we have to do when we're born into this world is we have to make ourselves, you know, and this is something we largely do unconsciously. And these are the things that are determined by our parents, where we're born in the world, the environment around us. And then he said the second message that sometimes we do this consciously, sometimes unconsciously, is we have to make something of ourselves. And that's a message we get along the way. And he said usually that comes around the time that we start to go to school. So when we're young, we can go out and play with our friends all day. And when we come home, our parents might ask us what we were doing. And we can say, oh, we were just out playing. And that's a pretty acceptable answer. We're just experiencing the world. And then about the time we go to school and we come home, the questions get a little bit more specific. And it's not just, what were you doing? It's, what were you starting to gain for yourself? What were you learning? What were you adding to yourself? And so he says this is where we sort of become commodities. We become commodity traders, where it's not enough just to have an experience, but we need to be constantly adding something to who we are. And so going back to the case study, I have a great resource I'm going to use. It's called The Sullivan Story. It's a lot of people send out Christmas cards every year. My mom was one of those people that not only sent the picture, but she sent a letter. All the way, I have the letters from age 2 to all the way into my 20s. And so not only she did that, but at some point for me and my siblings, she put all the letters and the pictures in this book. And so she gave that to all of us. And so this is going to be my my reference for today. So I'm going to start all the way at age 5. All right. So this is what she says. So she's talking about me and my brother. She says, Jeremy and Danny go to Cooper's Kitty College 2 mornings a week and love it. Jeremy enjoys simple woodworking and any kind of imaginative play with his brother, ranging from Star Wars to camping out. When Jeremy was asked what he wanted to do when he got bigger, he said, first go to kindergarten, then college, then be a doctor, then a dad, and smoke cigarettes and swear. So I really like that one because it shows both sides, right? There's the imaginative play, the ability just to be with what is. And then already in preschool being asked, what do you want to do? What do you want to make of yourself? And I had a surprisingly specific answer about that. So now I'm just going to go 1 year later. He's 6 years old. It says, Jeremy is a mini Jerry, and Jerry is my dad. He's neat and orderly. He takes responsibility for the dog and rides along with Jerry on weekends when he jogs. Kindergarten is the highlight of his day, and he adores his teacher. So this is another important one because I think, like I said, a lot of times when we're looking to make the self, the first place we look is to our parents. And so from a young age, I got the message that you're a lot like dad. You know, genetically, we're very similar. If you came to the Jukai ceremony, you can see me and my dad look a lot alike. And I think because of that, we have similar personalities. And there was a strong message that that you're like dad. And so we spent a lot of quality time. I'd ride my bike while he would run, and then over the years I would run with him, and spend a lot of time doing things like that. Okay, I'm gonna jump to, I think this, she put 7.5, so somewhere between 7 and 8. This is, Jeremy was voted on and won the Best Citizen Award by his classmates and teacher. He is really trying to live up to this award at school while mom suffers when he brings home from school all his pent-up energy that he reels on Danny and myself. Our kids are real aware of health foods because of Jerry. On Thanksgiving, Jeremy politely refused the turkey skin because it might clog my arteries. So I think this one was interesting to me because it's, we not only have one self, but we sort of have multiple selves that we kind of interact in the world. And so I was already learning that you have a certain self that you want to present out in the world, you want to be the best citizen, but there's all these other parts of ourselves that we don't always want to show, and sometimes we reserve those for other people, or we can't control those sometimes around those people. And so this one's just a little bit of a foreshadowing to things. Jump ahead a little bit here, all the way to age 11. Here again, she's talking about me and my brother. She says, Jerry and Dan are close buddies. They just can't keep their hands off one another, and they're usually wrestling or punching each other for fun. They help each other out on their paper route, rolling papers together at 5 a.m. It's been a wonderful learning experience for responsibility and learning about people. They're proud of themselves and their bank account. So this one, I think, was a big part of forming the self, in that we had like a strong example of hard work in our family. When we were up rolling papers at 5 a.m., my dad was usually up coming down the stairs, and he'd roll a couple of papers with us, and then he'd be out doing his morning exercise, and then he'd be at work by 6:30 and be usually there till maybe 8:30. And so, and he would talk to us about how when he was a kid, he had a lot of jobs, and that kind of told us like that's important. And so, so that's another part that I learned. And then actually on this next one, I want to read just a short one about my dad, because I think I'm getting to the age now where I'm wanting to make something of myself. And so this gives you an idea of, this is my dad at age 39. It says, Jerry continues to enjoy his orthopedic and sports medicine practice and feels fortunate to have such a great staff. A great deal of his leisure time is involved in his own running and triathlon training. He relishes in the kids' sports activities, encourages them in their mini triathlons that they've been participating in. That's all for now, he says. So I think she would actually ask him what he wanted to say in there. So now you'll start to see that message of like, who are you in this world? What are you going to make of yourself? I'm getting to the age now where I'm starting to get kind of a very clear picture of that. And so I'm going to jump all the way to age 16. Jeremy ran over 500 miles this summer, training for fall cross country. He had an outstanding year as MVP, and his team made sectionals. His leadership skills are being stretched, as he was the team captain in cross country this year, and also an apprentice leader in his youth group. It's refreshing to see this crazy but wholesome, motivated group of kids that he hangs out with. They've traveled all over the state with a core group of runners and their coach, running their butts off and having fun too. I'm realizing all too quickly that my son will soon be gone, as he's looking into physical therapy and checking out PT schools this winter. So at a very young age, I know for sure I told my high school guidance counselor my freshman year of high school that I wanted to become a physical therapist. And I kind of put my head down and figured out what it would take to do that. And so already here at age 16, I'm making moves to make that happen. All right, I'm gonna jump now to age 19. Jeremy is still a running man, doing cross country and track for Marquette both years. He made the traveling team and was able to compete at Stanford in California too. Even when his PT classes are intense, Jeremy's carved out time to develop fun friendships and work in the inner city in Milwaukee and Chicago. He's trying to set up a ministry / language / culture immersion in the Dominican Republic this summer, living with a family. So I mentioned this one partly to say that same focus followed me into college. But also too, I've talked a lot about my dad, but I think a part of my life that my mom influenced was definitely I'd say she's like a spiritual seeker. You know, both my parents grew up from a long line of Irish Catholics, you know, you do the same thing that your tradition does, and there's a lot of beauty in that, and that's something that I've experienced as well. But at some point when I was a kid, my mom had sort of a born again experience within Christianity, and she shared that with us kids, and so we had sort of the Catholic and the evangelical influence, and so part of that experience too was this sharing of your faith with other people, and that led me to get involved in different sorts of work in different countries and cities and things like that. And so that was a definite influence from my mom. Just one more, I think. Okay. Jeremy at 23. We have a photo of Jeremy dressed up in a much too long lab coat, testing me on the Biodex PT machine for his 6th grade science fair project. When he entered Marquette 6 years ago, sounded like it'd be forever. But his dream will be fulfilled in May. He ends the grueling but rewarding academic portion at Marquette in December. He will then complete 2 internships in the spring semester. One will be in Oklahoma at an Indian reservation, and the second will be at Marion Joy Rehabilitation Hospital in Wheaton, treating traumatic brain injury patients. All right, so there I'm going to close the Sullivan story. And I'm going to kind of pick up from where I left off there. And so it was a relatively charmed upbringing. I am super lucky. And what I realized in those years, in particular, maybe from like say 14 to 24, I had that very focused idea of what I wanted to make of myself. And it seemed very linear up into those years. You know, just put in more hard work and you get the result. Study harder, you get the grade on the test. Run more miles, you run a faster time. And when I got into the real world, I realized that it's not so linear. And in particular, because I chose to work with humans, and it wasn't all up to me anymore. And so my first job, I worked in the city of Camden, New Jersey. I with a couple of friends, decided that we were going to start a community house in Camden, which at the time was America's most dangerous city. And we teamed up with a local church that had been there for a long time. And Camden's a city kind of like, it's kind of like a Detroit or Gary, Indiana. It's a kind of post-industrial reality. Walt Whitman's actually from Camden, and he called it a city invincible because it had Campbell Soup, RCA Records, and New York shipyards, and all of those industries employ thousands of people. So anyone could walk down the street and get a good job. And over time, those industries left, and the things that happen when that happens is people lose jobs. So you have poverty, you have drugs, you have violence, racial tension. All of those things sort of culminated in Camden, and so that's where I chose to go after college. And I applied to the local hospital, and they said, well, really what we need is professionals to go into people's homes because there's a lot of fear around the city. And so that was my first job. And like I said, I had this mentality of you just work harder and everything works out okay. And I was realizing that that wasn't the case. My patients were elderly, so their bodies weren't resilient. They didn't have great health literacy or education altogether. And they didn't have a lot of resources to kind of have the medicine or the equipment or the things that they needed. And so in Buddhism, we talk a lot about gaps. You know, it's that when you have an expectation for something and it doesn't happen, there's a gap. And within Buddhism, the task is to see if you can stay in the gap. And I really wasn't able to do that. I had a hard time doing that. And so I started looking around and being like, well, I just made this 4-year commitment to these people and this cause, and yet I'm feeling very uncomfortable. And I had recently, in those years, met a couple of people who had ridden their bikes across the country. And so I decided, well, maybe what I could do is I can still carry this cause with me, and I'm gonna travel across the country on my bike and kind of take this adventure. And so that's what I did instead, just for 6 months of those 4 years. And I left Camden and I went across the Midwest. I went north all the way through the Rockies to the Canadian border, and then I hit the West Coast of Northwest Washington, and I went all the way down to Tijuana, Mexico. And so it ended up being like 7,000 miles. And I was able to carry the message of that, and just, I mean, it was probably one of the best experiences of my life, just feeling connected to people, but also being totally alone. Was surprisingly comfortable. And it was an interesting time, and I think it opened me up in that it got me away from the grind, and it created more openness in my life. And also too, I wouldn't have used this language at the time, but I got comfortable with not knowing, setting off on the bike for the day, not knowing where I'm gonna end up. And that was the first time in my life where I really kind of took my eyes off of this kind of very specific goals of what I was doing. And when I came back, I don't think it was coincidence that I went to therapy for the first time. Partly because of that openness that was coming in. And I was just noticing another big gap in my life. And that was, you know, I grew up in a big family, and I always thought I would have my own family. And I was realizing I was like a little behind the times in that area. You know, I was only 27 at the time, but a lot of my friends and family were starting to meet their partners and get married and settle down. And so I was realizing I hadn't been doing a lot of that. And so in that time, I was actually dating one of my housemates in the community house. And we got to the point where we were getting closer, and then I started feeling this real uncomfortable feeling. And I felt this before. And I decided the only way to kind of get relief was to break up. And so when I went to do that, you know, she knew me well enough, and she knew kind of my history well enough to say, like, I get that you need to end this relationship, but I think you should really talk to someone about it, because it seems like this is something that's kind of a pattern for you. And I wasn't really hearing that, because, I mean, I know who I am. Like, I am this solid person in the world, and just, I haven't met the right person, you know. People annoy me, and people, you know, it's, you know, and so, you know, it can't be me, right? And so I kind of shut that down, but then I happened to be talking to my mom, I think the next week or two on the phone, and I mentioned the breakup, and I mentioned the suggestion of therapy, and my mom said, yeah, I think that'd be a good idea for you. And and so I went, and in the very first session, the therapist was doing kind of like a standard intake, you know, asking about things like childhood and things like that. And he asked me if there had been any history of abuse of any sort. And I said, well, I never really said this out loud to anybody. And I don't think it's important, because like worse things happen to people. But something did happen when I was young. I was about 4 or 5, and it was with a older female babysitter, and I just never told anyone about it. And I said, I don't think it's important. And he said, well, I do. And I said, and I think, like, really what I'd like is just some help with these, like, relationship problems. And he said, well, I do think that's important, and I think actually addressing that could also help you with the problems that you're having. And so all that to say, I went to therapy. Not a lot came out of that because I just don't think I was ready at the time. But it was another opening, and so I was 27 at the time, and now I'm 44. So like a lot of years have passed, and it's been like a journey of studying the self, you know, to see, oh, there's this gap, this thing that is really limiting me, and it's really led me to more therapy and different types of retreats with like somatic work, and done some weird stuff with like psychodrama and like men's groups, and like did, you know, ceremonial psychedelic experiences, and all of that has been really helpful. And it's been helpful on that relative level of studying the self and figuring out like who am I, how, like really turn on the lights of like, I'm not just this solid thing, but all of these things shaped who I am. And that's really helpful. And that's something I'm really grateful for this particular sangha, is that there's an openness to talk about those things, that our leaders talk about their own experiences in therapy and their own traumas and the way that they've dealt with those. Because I think there's a risk in any spiritual community, any religion, of sort of this spiritual bypassing of like leaders who have great spiritual insights, but haven't done the human work emotionally. And there's been obviously a lot of history of people getting hurt on the other end of that. And so I'm very thankful to be in a place where we can address both sides of these things. And then as we look at that too, I think at some point, all this personal growth, like self-help stuff, there's a certain limit to that as well, you know? And in that, there's always another wound to heal. There's always another retreat to go on, book to read, you know? And at some point, it's like, at some point, it's where do you go from there? And so that's for me where Zen comes in, is the practice is, how do you be with exactly how you are right now, you know? And that no matter how good or bad something is in your life, how can you just be with it? And so that's been incredibly helpful for me. And I think the other piece of it for me is that it's been surprisingly heart-opening. I kind of developed my meditation practice on my own over the course of, say, 10 years. At some point, I sort of started letting go of my Christian faith and felt like a need for prayer, but the most appropriate way seemed to be silence. And so I just started to sit in silence, and then I read a couple of books and had sort of a shamatha concentration practice. And at some point I decided that I was going to go on a 7-day retreat, and I went out to, this was in 2017, I went out to the Shambhala Mountain Center, which is in kind of near Fort Collins, Colorado. And during one of the Dharma talks, the teacher mentioned bodhicitta. She mentioned like heart opening. And I was like, wait a second, this practice opens your heart? And I had, at that time, I had just ended another relationship, and it was someone I cared about, and I could see how hurt she was on the other side of that. And all I could feel was relief. I felt as if, man, my heart must be so closed that I can't even feel the pain that the person on this other side is feeling. And so when I heard that talk that night, I raised my hand in front of everybody, and I said, like, how do you know if your heart's open, you know? And I got like a very Buddhist answer, just saying, well, you just need to be with how you are right now. And it wasn't very, there's no fireworks to it. But But fast forward 4 years, I came to this center in 2021. I came to the Foundations of Mindfulness class, and I joined the fall retreat right afterwards, and it was a 7-day session. And I didn't really know many people, but I just sat in this room for 7 days in silence, and I started to feel this fullness in my heart. And by the end of the week, you, if you haven't done a retreat, they do what is called a council circle, where you share about your experience, but it's a practice of learning to share from your heart. And that practice was very important for me, to learn to listen, and then to not have to come up with a script about what to say, but just to trust yourself and what you're saying. That what's inside of you is okay. Like I don't think I could be doing this talk had I not learned to do that. And so that's been an incredible thing about this practice, has been the heart opening part of it for me as well. And I guess I want to just finish with one quote that kind of encapsulates kind of what my experience has been like, and it's from the book Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, which I never finished it, but there's a image that he uses. Suzuki Roshi talks about how, you know what it feels like to step out in the rain, like in a rain shower, and just get soaked by the water. And he says, now contrast that with if you just take like a long walk in a fog, and how after a while you start to notice that you get saturated by water. And so he says that's what Zen's like. And I'd say like that's been my experience, you know. And it's not just like that experience of the 4 years of like saying, like learning about heart opening and then kind of experiencing it. But I know now, like, it's been there all along. It's been there since they're that little 5-year-old kid, you know, talking about what he wanted to make of himself in the world. Like, it's always been there. It's just now sort of waking up to those things. And so, to me, I think that's the thing that was inside of me that I wanted to share. And I'm really happy that I've been able to share it with you all today. And I know not everyone gets the email with talking about the week speaker, but I went out of my way just to write in there that I'm actually at the end of the month, I'm moving up to the Milwaukee area to be closer to my significant other and her daughter. And I'm really excited about that, but I'm close enough and I have so many things here in the Chicago area that I wanted to say that like very publicly. I'm not kind of moving on or anything like that. So plan to see me around, hopefully Sunday morning Zens every once in a while, and retreats and things like that. But yeah, I'm not sure how we're doing on time. We've got plenty of time. So if there are any questions or comments or anything, I'd love to hear feedback.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeremy. Here we have a question, comment in the room here.
Jeremy, I just admire your spontaneity. I mean, to be able to do this talk without notes, right? Except for some letters. I wish I had that. I mean, I had to stand up here and have notes for, you know, a 1 minute, a 1 minute thing. So, I mean, I just admire that. And I know when I think like you have these letters, I don't have those, but I have memories of when I was a child, and there are specific ones, and they're mostly failures. No. They're all of my failures. When I didn't do something that I expected I should or whatever. Those are the memories that I have, and I guess if I think hard enough, I do have some good ones, but, you know, so thank you so much for your talk.
Thank you.
Thank you for your talk, Jeremy. I'm struck with your curiosity to do what you've done. must have, where does this curiosity come from? How did you reach out to find out so much about yourself at a pretty young age?
Yeah, I think it's the gap. I think it was expecting one thing and really being surprised when it wasn't there, and then having to kind of fill that in, I guess. I'd say that's what it is. Yeah.
Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Roshi, yeah, please.
I mean, wow. I mean, just wow. What a wonderful talk, Sekishin. I can relate to so much you're saying in my own life. And, you know, this thing about spiritual bypassing is really important. And if we don't study ourselves, there's a tendency to bypass the things that we can't work with emotionally. And my mother was schizophrenic, and I went to therapy in my late 20s for 3 or 4 years because I thought I was crazy. And I worked through a lot of stuff. And at the end, I was always afraid I was crazy like my mother. And the therapist said, "Robert, you're the sanest person I know." So that finished my therapy. But, you know, I remember a young man that came to the Zen Center of Los Angeles in the early 70s. He was really enthusiastic about Zen. He wanted to ordain. And my Izumi Roshi, you know, said to him, he said, "Well, that's wonderful that you want to ordain," but he hadn't gone to college. And my Izumi Roshi said, "Go to college first, get a good education, and then if you still want to ordain, come back." And I think that's really important, that what you're saying today. I just so appreciate your talk, that so much of the path comes from finding our way in the world. And if we don't do that, then trying to do a spiritual practice often ends up with spiritual bypassing and it doesn't turn out too well. And I also think there's, you know, I met your family when you did your Jukai recently, and you have a really wonderful, strong family of your parents and your siblings. So anyway, just a wonderful, beautiful talk, Sekishin. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Roshi. Any other question, comments, things coming up for you? Shuping, yeah, sure.
Thank you, Jeremy. Wow, your talk is really, I can feel it's really from the heart. I just want to add something that how I remember you started. When you started your foundation class, I started with a teacher training. And I just want to mention that the secret behind the scene that we talk about you is that, oh my God, if I have a student like Jeremy in my class, what is going to happen? He's so curious, ask so many questions. But now when I listen to you again, I think it's not as there's no fear for the teachers. You want the students that really curious, and this curiosity really help each other grow up. And you are a wonderful person. Thank you.
Jeremy, I just want to say that I so appreciated your vulnerability in this talk. I felt that you were so open, and I really felt your heart as you were talking. And I thank you so much for sharing. And I just want to say I'm 83. And just this last year, I went back into therapy. And it's one of the best things I've ever done for myself. It's been absolutely wonderful. And it's great with the combination of meditation and Zen Buddhism. It's a great combination. So thank you very much, Jeremy. It's so great to know you more.
Others? We do still have a little more time, although there is a coffee cake calling us. Oh, over here, hold on just a minute.
Okay, thank you so much for that. As you were speaking, it made me think, you were talking about having an open heart and, what that meant, and, listening to you speak, your bravery came through. You opened up your heart and you were so brave, and you created such an intimate moment, I think, with all of us. And I just wanted to say thank you. That was beautiful.
Do we have a movement online? I think we might have. I see. Any other last thoughts, comments, questions? I think it was just a beautiful talk, Jeremy. I don't know if I can get myself also in the Zoom here. Here I am. I just want to say that it was a beautiful example of living with an open heart, and as others said, just being vulnerable and intimate with an audience. Like, I feel like I really got to know you better, which is really wonderful. And I just like how you gave that example of like when you're little, children just went out and played and just stayed in that space of just being with what is. And I feel like you still execute that so lovely, which is unfortunately something I think we lose as we age. So that was really wonderful. Thank you. Okay, if Ken said no, maybe we're all done then. Any other questions, comments? Well, I so enjoyed doing this together with all of you. That was a beautiful Dharma talk. Thank you for all sharing in that with us. We're going to continue with a little fellowship here. Missing all of you online. Thank you for this Sunday. We'll see y'all again.